Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. First, there was Iphigenia in Brooklyn. Then there was Catone in Utica. And now there is Giulini in London. Yes, he's still hanging around London, apparently. Well, he died in 2005, but, who's counting? Actually, this is one of those boxes that's still around. And I love going through these things because it gives me an opportunity to cover a lot of repertoire and talk about some artists who haven't featured all that frequently in some of these videos because, well, they're dead. And that's a problem. Well, it's not just that they're dead. It's that they're dead and they did, music that doesn't always make my top 10 lists or, for whatever reason, or they haven't been featured recently in a large series of reissues. And Giulini, actually, I mean, he's a major guy, no question about it. And he's featured in a lot of box sets, but they came out a while ago. And he's probably due for like a big box set from EMI at some point. I expect maybe that will come. He's had one from Deutsche Grammophon. So his Deutsche Grammophon stuff is sort of covered. But, initially, you may recall, he got like this one, Giulini in London. There was Giulini in Chicago. Then there was a Giulini doing concertos. And there was, all of this stuff. And then, of course, there is a Sony Giulini box. There was. It's out of print. And then initially, Deutsche Grammophon did the same thing that EMI, which is now Warner, did, which was Giulini in Chicago or Giulini in America and Giulini in... It was, for some reason, it was considered to be desirable to break his output up into little bits and group them geographically. And why they did that, I have no clue. I mean, it would have been so much easier just to toss everything in a box and issue it and keep it in print long enough to actually sell the bloody thing and get some attention. But that's not how these things work at major labels. They issue boxes and they go out of print and they reissue other boxes and they try and get you to buy the same stuff 100 times. So take this as a case in point. Giulini in London. I'm going by booklet this time because that way I should get a more accurate track listing than going simply by the discs contained herein, of which there are 16 of music, and then one of those interview biography things, which actually can be interesting. They talk about the artists who worked for him and how fabulous he was, and you get to hear him talk too. And he had kind of a funny little squeaky voice. It's kind of interesting, but no. That's okay. I have a funny little squeaky voice too. So we're all on the same page. I'm going to go through here and talk about what's in here, but I want to make one thing very, very, very clear. This is not even remotely complete. Not by the slightest shred of imagination is it complete. First of all, it contains none of the Covent Garden operas, and he did wonderful operas in London. He did Mozart, he did Verdi. I mean, it's terrific stuff. But there's also no vocal music. There's no vocal music at all, except for the ninth, which is unavoidable. But basically there is no vocal music. I mean, he did the Beethoven Missa Solemnis and Mass in C major. He did the Mozart Requiem. He did the Verdi Requiem and 4 sacred pieces. I mean, some of these were really classic performances, and they are not here. And there's no reason for them being not here other than the fact that it would have been more expensive to include them. And that, to me, is not a nice thing. So the Giulini in London is more like sort of Giulini visiting London rather than spending serious time in London. Nonetheless, these 16 discs contain some fantastic music making, and particularly it's his early period, because like so many conductors, as he got older, he kind of got slower or more deliberate or more sober, whatever you want to call it. And, with Giulini, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing because he was so saintly and everybody loved him so much. And he was so serious as an artist. I mean, he really was so committed and sincere that, it didn't really matter how slow he got. You just felt that he was more committed and sincere. He was sort of Saint Carlo. I mean, he really was. He was. Everybody loved him, and his music making had such integrity and seriousness, and sometimes, yes, severity, that it was hard to criticize him. It's really kind of funny, but we'll talk about that as we go, about his special characteristics. So the collection begins with Haydn Symphony number 94, The Surprise, which is okay. It's not like, fabulous big band Haydn, but it's decent. But then the Boccherini Symphony in C minor, opus 41, and the Boccherini Overture in D. Those are so nice to have, and they are rare. They were rare back in the day. These were recorded in, 1956. You didn't hear that stuff back in those days. Most of these recordings are made with the Philharmonia or with the LSO, and it really is wonderful to see that stuff still around, and very stylish performance, so it's lovely. And also the Schubert Unfinished Symphony, which is really a lovely performance. It's a very, very good performance. And Beethoven's Egmont Overture, which is, I think, a little on the sluggish side, but, decent. Disc number 2. What have we got? Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony and the Eighth Symphony. Okay, now comes the very complicated issue of Giulini and Beethoven. I think it's entirely admirable that he took Beethoven so seriously that he never even finished a complete Beethoven cycle. I mean, he almost did at the very end of his life in Frassoni, the La Scala cycle, but otherwise there are, that's missing the ninth, and there are just individual symphonies on all of the other labels, and you have to respect that. You have to respect that. He had such reverence for the music that he did not rush into doing a cycle, which nowadays there are a dime a dozen. I think that's really cool, frankly. His Beethoven is not the most exciting Beethoven out there. It's not the most muscular Beethoven out there. He was an intensely Italianate conductor in the sense that everything he did was informed by a truly dedicated and expressive lyricism, sometimes at the expense of sheer power or energy, but also because he was Italian, he had a good sense of rhythm, so he could take slow tempos, he could pay a lot of attention to inflecting a melody and have it sound quite natural as he did it. I don't think Giulini ever sounds affected. He can sound sluggish, he can sound a little underpowered, but that lyricism is always there, that beautiful, songful character he brought out in everything that he conducted. He really did. And that included his Beethoven. That's why his Pastoral Symphony is so lovely. And that's why this performance of the ninth, which is on disc 3, was always considered a little bit underpowered. A little bit droopy. Even in the last movement, the first movement's 18 minutes long. It's not very, very dynamic, but it's very, very beautiful. And again, his seriousness and musicality tends to insulate him from saying that he's just being dull. He's not. There's always intention behind what he does and a genuine musical impulse. So it's hard to criticize his work in that respect. But you might well prefer more exciting Beethoven. And that's perfectly reasonable. Okay, next. Rossini Overtures. Those were fabulous with the Philharmonia. Absolutely fabulous. Rossini, again, he's one of those composers who really benefits from conductors who sweat the details, because his overtures consist of myriad tiny details that should be perfectly in place. And Giulini was wonderful in that music. And his Schumann-Renner Symphony was also a major sort of Giulini hallmark, warhorse, if you want to call it. He re-recorded it, of course, with the Los Angeles Philharmonic for Deutsche Grammophon, a marvelous performance. But this earlier one, which is equally fine, and he meddled with the orchestration quite a bit to bring out the wind parts. I love it. It's terrific. And the Manfred Overture, which was exactly the same coupling he later did in Los Angeles. Then we get some Verdi. We get the La Traviata Preludes and the overtures to the Sicilian Vespers and La Forza del Destino. And again, these are all with the Philharmonia, basically. Next, the Franxx Symphony in D minor. Very fine performance of the Franxx Symphony. Really good, with an exciting account of the finale. A performance that, funny thing about Giulini, some of these performances, that you rehear them and they're wonderful, but they don't get put into my lists or anybody else's, and I'm not quite sure why. I think it's because of the way that they were marketed and sold, and also because he had a tendency, although his repertoire was very wide in terms of its range of styles and idioms, in the basic romantic to early 20th century, categories in which he worked. He did German music, he did French music, he did Italian music. He was very good that way, but within each of those categories, it was rather limited. And he re-recorded everything over and over again as he switched labels. So all of the stuff he did for EMI, he later did for Deutsche Grammophon, and he later did it for Sony, and it was the same music. So his earlier versions, which were often better because they were, I think, just simply more exciting, and he was younger and fresher at the time, they got ignored or forgotten or deleted, and that prevented them from achieving some of the acclaim I think they would have deserved as classics had they been the only versions by him around. And it just goes to show, duplication by the same guy and the same music is not always a good thing for your reputation, because if your remake is a bore and your original one is out of print, then where are you? So the Franxx D minor is lovely, and he does a bit of Siché et Eros, which is nice too, and Bizet's Jeux d'Enfants, which is fine, and a really good Night on Bear Mountain, Night on Bald Mountain. They call it Night on Bear Mountain. I call it Night on Bald Mountain because the Russian is actually bald, but boy, it's really good. Very exciting. Very exciting. Then we get his Brahms Cycle, which is with the Tragic Overture, and it's with the Philharmonia and the New Philharmonia. Yeah, that's the only, and the Haydn Variations. There we go. That's all of his Brahms in here. Now, I think Giulini was a wonderful Brahms conductor. I really do. I think his first and second in Los Angeles are just unbelievably great, even if rather deliberate. His earlier Brahms Cycle, this is his first one, is far less deliberate than his Vienna remakes, all four of them that he did later, after both of the Los Angeles and Vienna ones are on DG. But he was a really good Brahms conductor. And again, he was, I think, sort of obliterated from the minds of Brahms people by his later repetition of repertoire. Because these are very, very good Brahms symphonies. Although I have to say, one of the most fascinating moments in them is the finale of the third, which is quite good here. But in his Vienna remake, it's really fast and really exciting, although the rest of it's quite slow. It's a very interesting live interpretation, sort of spontaneously caught on the wing. And it goes to show that as he got older, he didn't always get slower. But this is really solid, beautiful Brahms. And that attention to the lyrical element really pays dividends in his Brahms, I think. I really think, because Brahms was a melodist. I mean, he was a contrapuntist, he was everything, he was German, but Brahms really cared about just a beautiful singing melody. And that beautiful singing line is what you hear in these Brahms performances. So that's great. Then we get the Tchaikovsky Second Symphony, which is lovely to have and not usual for its time, and Francesca da Rimini. A good Francesca da Rimini, there isn't enough tam-tam at the end. There never is, although it's not bad at the beginning. Here, I'm going to play the beginning of Francesca. Do-do-do-do. Ooh, yeah. Actually, I did it better, but it's good. It's good, and it's not droopy. It's never droopy. And then his Tchaikovsky Pathétique. That's one of the great Pathétiques. It's fantastic. A superb performance of the Pathétique, and a very good Romeo and Juliet as well. Very exciting and with no dragging and either anywhere, which is, yes. Let's see. Then we have his Dvorak 7, 8, and 9. Now, he did Dvorak 7, 8, and 9. Also, what else is here? Also the Carnival Overture and a rather dull Scherzo Capriccioso. So we can write that off. Giulini, again, here he's very, very good in this music. But he did the 8th and the 9th, again, for DG in Chicago. And then he did, I think, 7 and 9. I don't think he did 8 again. I can't even remember. With a Concertgebouw for Sony. And they were coupled and recoupled and released and re-released. It was just, these are his great Dvorak recordings. 7, 8, and 9. With the Philharmonia, on EMI, Warner, whatever it's called now. That's the best of his Dvorak. Although I have to say, the Chicago 8 and 9 are pretty terrific too. They really are terrific, and some people prefer them. And I can understand that. I mean, the more modern sonics and the more probing, if you want to call it probing, it probes interpretation of the eighth. But they're beautiful performances. They really are. And then we get, oh my, Debussy, La Mer, and the Nocturnes. These are great. This is one of the great La Mers. He also re-recorded La Mer multiple times. Not necessary. It wasn't necessary. It's just a waste of plastic. These are great. Great Debussy recordings. And it's the complete nocturnes with the chorus at the end. And we get, let's see, Ravel's Miroir and Daphnis and Chloe Suite number 2, and the Mother Goose Suite, and the Pavane for a Dead Princess, and the Rhapsody Espagnole. We're now on disc 15, by the way. Now, the Rhapsody Espagnole, he did a bang-up Rhapsody Espagnole Los Angeles, but this one's very, very good. Mother Goose Suite was like his go-to work. He conducted the last movement, the Fairy Garden, more beautifully than anyone in the universe ever has. You just wish he did the complete ballet. He only did the suite. And God, it's gorgeous. His most beautiful version of it, however, is his last one, the Concertgebouw one on Sony, which is so heartbreakingly beautiful that it's practically, it should have a warning label on it. It's going to reduce you to a puddle when you hear it. But oh my God, he just loved this music. Its childlike simplicity, its sweetness, its lyrical, exquisitely shaped melodies. It's just, it was made for him. It really was. The color, it's gorgeous. Gorgeous. And then we get some fire. We get El Amor Brujo with Victoria de Los Angeles. This is about the squeaky cleanest El Amor Brujo you've ever heard. I mean, Victoria de Los Angeles or Victoria de Los Angeles, whatever you want to call her, she was not a down and dirty gypsy singer. She did all of this music very, very beautifully. She was a great singer, but I mean, this music has some real, what would you call it? Canto, hondo, gypsy sort of, smarminess to it. It can anyway. It doesn't here. It doesn't here at all. This is a very tidy El Amor Brujo, very clean. It's a legitimate way of doing the music because Faya himself was nothing if not refined to the point of, asceticism and total self-abnegation. So yeah, you can do it that way, but there's a little bit more fervor and passion than these folks bring to it. Still, I enjoy it. And then disc 16, this is the last disc, right? Yeah, we get the dances from the Three-Cornered Hat, which are very nicely done. The Firebird Suite, which Giulini did every 15 minutes, and very well. It's very nice. And Britten, the 4C interludes, and the Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, which were excellent. He was a terrific Britten conductor. He always was devoted to Britten's music. He conducted it superbly, and that's really nice to have. So that's it. Then you get the bio thing at the end. That's what's in here. It's a wonderful collection that's fully representative of Giulini's art and his repertoire. It really is. But like I said, it isn't complete. Not nearly. So there's room for another Giulini box probably to come. I don't know. But they've redone this as the Warner thing. And the other stuff, like the Chicago years or the concerto box and all that stuff, seems to have disappeared. Or some of it has disappeared. This is still sitting around. For how long, I don't know. And we'll see. It would not surprise me to see a big Giulini box popping out on the horizon. Hopefully with all of the vocal stuff included. But that, my friends, is Giulini in London. And I wanted to mention it because it's just still out there. And I like talking about, great musicians making mostly great music. That makes all of this so enjoyable for all of us, I'm sure. So please, folks, keep on listening. Thank you for joining me and take care.